Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to talk about how to make the best RAM class setup possible. And this doesn't mean just copying my exact class setup, because obviously you're going to have different preferences for your individual playstyle and what mode you play, regardless if you're playing multiplayer, ground war because you like the bigger maps, or if you're playing Warzone, you're going to want to change the class up a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and explain the different information that's going to help you make those decisions throughout the video. We're going to be talking about recoil patterns, the overall pros and cons to the actual attachments versus what they're actually telling you in game, because those stat bars are definitely not accurate. I'll explain a little bit of my testing and the update to TAC laser that I think you guys definitely got to know. And then I'll be walking through some of my recommendations based off my individual preferences. And we ended up doing the RAM because you guys went crazy. We had 27,000 votes and 40% of those were for the RAM-7. Go ahead and comment down below which weapon you'd like to see next. As soon as this video hits 2,000 likes, I'm going to go ahead and start working on that individual video, which you guys have been destroying. It's been taking like 6 hours, so I don't know if that's too low of a goal now, but hopefully you guys can go ahead and hit that number. And if you're brand new looking to find your way back for whatever reason, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on so you'll stay up to date on my future content. So if you're the first time watching one of my videos, what you'll notice is I have the individual attachment that is paying attention to here. What I have is the overall aim down sight in milliseconds. And then this number in the top right is how much slower it is in frames compared to the original 234 milliseconds. And one frame is approximately 16.7 milliseconds, and that is taken at 60 FPS. So that's what we're going to be using here as a comparison. So when it says one frame, that's an additional 16.7 milliseconds. So we'll go ahead and go through these. And one thing I have added, as you'll notice here, is there's a green line that goes over top of the blue. And basically what I did is copy these blue lines that I drew here and completely overlapped it, so you can get a direct comparison of that recoil pattern in case I didn't start in the most perfect spot possible. So right here, what we're looking at is the original recoil pattern with 30 bullets fired. When we go to the Eclipse, you can see it kind of comes up here, and it does drop off a little bit shorter. Not a huge difference though, mostly negligible. When we get to the Ranger barrel, you're getting more range, more recoil control, and you can see it is noticeably less both in horizontal and vertical. When we go to the Commando, you can see it's not a huge difference, but it does kind of round out that little sharp corner that you get there. And I think that's one of the benefits of the Commando. You're not getting a penalty in aim down sight time, which is definitely important. And then on top of that, it kind of rounds it out and it's not quite as big. So you are getting a little bit of rounding, even though it doesn't look like a huge benefit. This is going to be a little bit easier to control because it doesn't have that sharp cut that's going on with this one here. Merc, you can see it does cut it down quite a bit. Still has a little bit of sharp corner there. As far as Ranger goes, you can see it's cutting it down. Operator, 2-frame penalty. Rubberized does do quite a bit, more than I thought initially until I overlapped them. And then that is a 0-frame penalty. VOK, yes, it does slightly reduce it, but very, very minimal. And for the GI Mini, it's not helping at all. And this one's going to be a +0 frame. So in reality, you're really just getting an optic for the sake of having an optic, because one of the things that this weapon doesn't have going for it is it does not have the cleanest iron sights. So it's sometimes harder for people to deal with. Merc Thermal, you can see it's going to be way slower and you're not really getting much of an advantage. NVG Enhance, it does look like it's helping out a little bit, but you do get a huge penalty. So a lot of times, even though these could be cool, they're not very helpful in terms of aim down sight time. The best multiplayer Warzone, you can see this one ends up being pretty tight, very much lower, much easier to control. And then the best with the VOK. So the VOK is actually helping out with the recoil. So even though it has a 1-frame penalty, it could be worth it, especially if you're trying to get rid of the iron sights. So pretty much how the damage works for the RAM is it has 3 damage ranges. The first damage range being 28 meters, then it drops off to 23. Then to 18. Basically, for the headshot multiplier, you're going to end up with the 42 damage, 35, and 27. In core game modes with the 100 health, it's going to be 4, 5, or 6 shots to kill. If you land headshots, you can get that lowered 3 to 4. That ends up being 204 milliseconds, 272, or 340. And then obviously it drops off lower for the headshots. Warzone full plates, 250 damage required to down a player. 9, 11, and 14 shots. If you manage to only land headshots, you could get it lower to 6, 8, and 10. And obviously, you're getting a huge reduction if you have that particular aim. So this is just actually the minimum, but you're probably going to have somewhere in the average between these individual numbers. So between 6 and 9, depending on how many headshots you land. And that ends up being 544, 680, and 884 milliseconds. And then obviously you get this insane time to kill if you only manage to land headshots. When it comes to the range of this weapon, the base range is 28 meters and 44. So basically for those first numbers you're going to get the 28 damage all the way up to 28 meters. Then between 28 to 44, you're going to get the second number. And then 44 plus, you're going to get the third number. If you equip the Eclipse barrel, you're going to get 35 meters out of it and 55. And then that ends up being a 25% increase. When you do the Ranger, you're going to get 39 and 62, 40% increase. You combine the Eclipse and the Monolithic, you're going to get 37 meters and 58, along with a 32-ish, 32 and a half increase there. And then we got the Ranger and Monolithic, which is going to give you the 41 meters and 65 for those individual drop-offs, which end up being a huge increase in terms of overall range. But in terms of actually comparing these two, you're not getting a huge difference on these first ones. So that ends up being just a trade-off of range versus aim down sight time. But the magic thing that's going to come in here is the tack laser. And we're going to talk about why that's changed recently. And it's just something that I found out. I don't know if Exclusive Ace found it out recently, but this is new information to me. So I did a video on the Growl and I broke down the tack laser and I was explaining that you get a 2-frame bonus where it actually shaves 2 frames off your aim down sight time. And I went back in my footage and I looked at it over again, and he did a whole video on the tack laser and he mentioned that you get a 20% reduction to aim down sight time, which I had never heard of before. I'd never seen. I was kind of going off 2 frames because most of the time when you check it with all the weapons, it's between 1.5 frames to 2.5 frames. So most of the time I just round it to 2, and that's what it works like for the base weapon. And I ended up asking him, I said, I saw your video and I could not get 167 milliseconds. I couldn't shave 4 frames off. I was only able to get it down to 200 milliseconds, which ends up being 2 frames. I even showed him here the footage frame by frame, exactly what I was doing. And he was talking about that in his video. He was using a fully decked out weapon, which ended up impacting the attack laser. So I went in and I tried this for myself with the RAM, and I did end up getting 2 frames and 4 frames when I ended up trading this out. So I think this is important to know because that means you kind of got to go based off feel. And I was able to get 2 frames even decked out if I was using an optic. So there's different variables at play here, and you kind of just got to go play it by ear and feel what it's like, because in some scenarios it's going to give you more frames than others. So the tack laser can be very valuable, especially if you understand how it works with the individual laser while you're aiming down sight, which he explains in that video. So I'll link that in the description if you want to go ahead and check that out. So I wanted to go a little bit further just on the attack laser example so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Right here I have a side-by-side comparison. This is how we test the individual frames. This is when the ADS animation starts. You're going to see that they're lined up because right here on the screen, you're going to see it pop up at the exact frame that you're able to hold for mount. It's a little bit blurry. It's blurry in my end too. That just makes it so I don't drop all kinds of frames and my system crash while I'm doing both of these things at the time. So it just keeps it a little bit more streamlined. But what you're going to notice is I go frame by frame, and right around 234 is when you're supposed to be aimed down sight. So this is fully aimed down sight for your weapon, and this is what it should be. What you'll notice is if you have the tack laser on, it actually gets the motion faster. So the one on the left is the tack laser, and the one on the right is without. So if I start from here, you'll see the aim down sight gets there faster. 2 frames before you fully aim down sight without the tack laser. So you can see the tack laser gives you a 2-frame advantage. Now let's go ahead and look at it with a fully stacked weapon. So we have the same example here. The one on the left is going to be the fully equipped with the tack laser, and the one on the right is the tack laser removed. So it's going to be a 4 attachment setup without the tack laser. We can see the exact same thing happens on that frame, 33 milliseconds. That's when that's going to pop up. And then as we go through, you're going to see that they aim down sight. The one on the left is with the tack laser. Right here is when the regular gun ADSs. And then this one actually ADSs with a 2-frame penalty compared to that at 267 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and look how much further this one has to aim down sight before you get it. 4 additional frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's when it's aimed down sight. If I go further, it's like a half frame. You can see the background doesn't move though. That's the thing you're really paying attention to. So you end up getting, the only thing that changed in this scenario is the tack laser. So from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 frames better, which is absolutely insane. All I changed was the tack laser. So in some scenarios, since it's a 20% difference based off of what Exclusive Ace said, that means that in some cases with the slower ADS, the tac laser is going to be clutch, and it's going to do way more for you than a majority of the other attachments in aim down sight time. But what it also means is if you have an incredibly fast aim down sight weapon, you're going to get a little bit less benefit out of it. So right before we talk about some of the other attachments, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the range and how this weapon compares to the other 5.56 rifles. This is a time to kill chart with milliseconds on the left and the distance in meters on the bottom. So the lower the number is on this chart, the faster it kills. So as it goes further away, the time to kill increases because the bullets do less damage. So that's what we're going to look at here. And you can see the RAM is colored in red. It's going to be the bottom line here. The second line is the M4. You can see they're pretty even. They kind of have similar drop-offs. And you can see that the RAM is always better than the M4 in terms of actual time to kill if you manage to hit your shots. Even though they pretty much do the same damage, the difference is the rate of fire is faster in the RAM, so it just kills faster. But obviously you got to account for the practical time to kill because the recoil is a little bit odd. It goes up and kind of has a sharp left and up to the side, which a lot of people, that's hard to control. We notice the same kind of recoil pattern with the Kilo. If we eventually get to that video, I'll be able to show that off. But what I did want to focus on here is if you can hit your shots, that's the key. If you can hit your shots, this is the best weapon that you can use in Warzone up to about 65 meters, which I was talking about on that sheet of where the damage drop off is. If you're using the longest barrel and the monolithic suppressor, you're going to be able to get the furthest damage possible. So if you can hit your shots, it is the best rifle in the entire game. Maybe for 2 meters in the middle here it's not, but it ends up being pretty much the best rifle in Warzone. And this is actually the #1, in my opinion, best rifle in multiplayer, hands down, because pretty much all your engagements are going to be within that 60 meter mark. So keeping that in mind, once it drops off beyond that point, it ends up being like the third best out of these ones on here. It drops below the M13 and it drops below the Grau. So up to this point, if you can hit your shots, you're going to have a good weapon on your hands, and it's slept on because of that recoil pattern. But if you can master it and you're aware of it, you will be melting pretty much in the lobby. All right. So first thing off, when we talk about Warzone, we're going to use a monolithic suppressor. Personally, I would use it on this weapon because the aim down sight time is still really good, still really competitive. The only reason that I would ever recommend using Eclipse is if you didn't want to use the tac laser and instead maybe you went with the aim down sight stock, so you can aim down sight faster, the close quarter stock, which is 1 frame faster, or you went with the stipple grip tape, which is going to also be 1 frame faster. So either way, if you're going to go with the tac laser, it's kind of mandatory. You might as well go with the Ranger. So when it comes to the underbarrel for the multiplayer, I would go with the Commando foregrip because it does cut out that little sharp corner. So it should be a little bit easier for you to manage that recoil pattern. Ammunition, you got to go with the 50. This is the one knock on this weapon. If they made this 60, if they made this at 60, I would pretty much have no reason to use the M4, but those 10 bullets could be pretty valuable within Warzone. And that's sometimes the trade-off, especially as you jump into like quads where there could be 4 potential enemies. And that is the 5 attachment setup that I would recommend for multiplayer and Warzone. That's pretty much the same class setup, but there's going to be some people who are like, man, I want the optic. I want the optic. You could definitely go with the VLK optic, which that's kind of what I showed off there. And you're going to have to sacrifice something. The only thing that you can really sacrifice, because the VLK is slightly helping with that recoil, is your underbarrel, unless you don't mind the slower aim down sight. Then you drop the tac laser. So that's really going to be a personal preference. What I showed off in the testing was removing the underbarrel and keeping that tac laser. And that's mainly what I would probably use. So those are the 2 class setups that I'd recommend for you to go ahead and try out, whether it's multiplayer Warzone or only Warzone. Those are some great options there. And a lot of times, if you're going to go with the first option I showed, you can always combine this with the sniper rifle like the HDR, and you take care of both different ranges, which is close to medium, where this thing is an absolute beast. And then once you drop off a little bit further ranges, just use a sniper, take out the enemy that way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you did, please hit that like button. And if you're brand new, looking to find your way back because you want more of this type of content, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.